Good afternoon, everyone. We now seem to have the majority of the audience signed in. And given that it's 2 o'clock, I think we're good to get started. My name is Heather Lyle, and I'm from the events team here at Registers of Scotland. I'll be your webinar host today, and I'm also supported by my events team colleague, Frank and Marco. So we're here today for a webinar on unlocking Sasines, and it should last approximately an hour, including time for questions. You may have joined a Registers of Scotland webinar before, but for anyone new to the webinars, I'll quickly run through some good housekeeping points. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, please type them into the chat box situated on the right-hand side of the screen. There will also be time at the end of the webinar for additional questions. Please note that if you do experience any sound or technical issues, this unfortunately is most likely to be at your end. Therefore, we suggest exiting and rejoining the webinar to resolve your issue. If we do experience any problems at our end, I will alert the audience and we will pause the presentation until the issues are resolved. Lastly, we ask that you do not record or share any details from the webinar today with non-business users. And please note that we are recording this webinar for training purposes. So without any further delay, let me introduce Janet Egdell, who's on our executive management team and is our accountable officer. She will be the presenter for our webinar today, and she is also supported by Keith Taylor and Steve Davey from the Unlocking Sasines team, who'll be on hand to answer all of your questions. So I'll now hand over to you, Janet.
Thank you very much, Heather, and good afternoon to everybody. Really great to have you here this afternoon and to be able to talk through what we've been doing on Unlocking Sasines. Really exciting how we're trying to make the General Register of Sasines more accessible. It's our new approach to better visualising the data that is held within the register. Since the autumn of last year, we've been considering how we achieve some of the benefits of land register completion through a data perspective. And this is what I'm going to speak to you about today. We hope to cover these 4 areas by the end of today's session. So give you some background, make you aware of why we're developing the Unlocking Sasines project. And we hope you'll recognise what Unlocking Sasines does and what it isn't. And we hope you'll understand the benefits we believe it can deliver to both ROS customers and the citizens of Scotland. You'll know how it works and how you can get involved to share your data. To set the context for our discussion, I'm going to start off by quickly covering the differences between the Register of Sasines and the Land Register. The General Register of Sasines was set up in 1617 and is the oldest national public land register in the world. It's a textual, deeds-based register with a wealth of information contained within it. However, it's harder to search and it requires skills and experience to understand a lot of the information held within it. And then there is the Land Register, which is our modern map-based structured digital register, which records ownership of land and property in Scotland. It's available for searching online and through ScotList. In order to move from that left-hand side to the right-hand side, from the Sasines to the Land Register, or to appear in the Land Register for the first time, there are various triggers and a few different routes. The first registrations is the largest component of these. When a property transaction takes place, the title is automatically moved from Sasines to the Land Register. But we've also got 2 other mechanisms that can help us increase the speed at which we would complete the Land Register. Keeper-induced registration, or KIR, is where the keeper moves the title to the Land Register using her legal powers. And voluntary registration is where landowners proactively seek to move their title to the Land Register. So with this context in mind, what progress have we made so far towards Land Register completion? And why are we looking to Unlocking Sasines to help us surface more usable information? Well, in 2014, Scottish ministers invited us to complete Scotland's Land Register by 2024. And this is not something we can do on our own. We need people and organisations to submit their land and property for registration. As well as our partners at the Law Society of Scotland, RICS and Scottish Government, we've been working with over 100 different stakeholders across the public, private and third sector. Since 2014, a vast amount of work has been put in to actively pursue this goal. In terms of voluntary registrations, we've spent a substantial amount of time engaging with Scotland's public and private sector to promote the benefits of a voluntary registration. And this engagement has resulted in a number of successful programmes of VRs, and it's allowed us to understand the market pretty well. Working with landowners and agents, we are confident that the early adopters have been engaged. For those who haven't engaged to date, we know that the cost can be a big barrier. In terms of keeper-induced registration, that's a much smaller part of what we can do, partly due to the cost being borne entirely by Registers of Scotland. And it's best being used to support local authorities in adding housing stock to the land register. However, that tends to be those local authorities that have good GIS data to support that process. So with all of this work, it's contributed to the amount of land mass we have moved from the Sasines register to the land register. And this map gives you that visual representation of what it looks like. The grey areas are the ones still on Sasines. The blue areas are the ones on the land register, and the pink areas are the cases which are currently being processed by Registers of Scotland and are due to appear on the land register in the near future. Currently, too much of this map is grey. As at September 2021, the blue is only 46.7% of the land mass. And that red, pink area rather is another 6%. A lot of the grey areas are bits of land that don't change hands regularly, such as large rural estates or social housing. So moving the land mass and the remaining addresses across would require significant financial and people resources for both ourselves at Registers of Scotland and for the people who own the land still in Sasines. So that's a bit of background, and how does that all add up to the Unlocking Sasines project? Well, we know that the voluntary registration is not for everyone and that KIR doesn't work in every situation. We know from our market analysis that we won't get the level of transactions in from first registrations to transfer the rest of that grey area. So it won't add up to the land mass or the addresses that we require. So we also know that some of the benefits of land register completion are achievable without completing the land register, including and most importantly, answering the question, who owns Scotland? The information at a high level is available from across both the land register and the Sasines register. So to speed up one part of land register completion and realise some of the benefits faster, we've been looking at how we can make the information more accessible from Sasines. We believe that it will allow us to indicate the likely ownership of areas of land that are not on the land register with a high degree of certainty, high enough for that information to be used in various ways and by different parties. So, to be clear, Unlocking Sasines is not intended to be a substitute for a fully land registered title. Rather, it's a complementary approach to address one aspect of delivering the benefits that we get from a complete land register, but doing that in a timelier manner. You can see we've got our two strands here, two distinct strands of land register completion. In the long term, we still intend that every title in Scotland will be fully registered on the land register, with all the detail that goes into that process. Unlocking Sasines is a separate activity that we've been investigating as part of our wider approach. Functional completion is when property that transacts regularly is on the land register. So it's the term used to identify the stage of land register completion that will benefit the majority of the general public. Our priority is to realise these benefits for as many people as possible as soon as possible. To do this, we've categorised the types of property that we think need to be on the land register to achieve this goal. So it's those addresses that transact regularly. We've included all of those, but we've excluded those that won't transact regularly. So examples of properties that don't transact regularly are things like social housing, as I mentioned earlier, large rural estates, and there's addresses where mail can be delivered but no one resides. For example, PO boxes. So that gives us a target for functional completion and a focus for the end of 2024. To quantify it, we think that this is approximately 2.5 million addresses. And we've already registered about 83% of those addresses. And we plan to achieve the rest as soon as we possibly can. Unlocking Sasines complements that. It helps us to visualize the register and help us to fill in some of the information gaps represented by properties that are still on the Sasines register and are unlikely to transact. That will allow us to be innovative in our approach, faster, mindful of the public purse, and help us to reduce costs wherever possible, whilst at the same time supporting our efforts to address some of the key objectives. Most importantly, it will allow us to answer the question, who owns Scotland? So we've just stated that we think unlocking Sasines can help us access some of the benefits of a completed land register in a faster way. So let me just remind you of the benefits are for registering land register other benefits of a land registered title. The transactions can then be more efficient, which is better for the customer, and our ability to process transactions faster. It creates a single searchable map-based record, as those land register records are all mapped. It provides insight to citizens, academia, policymakers, and it's a national asset. So we think that we can get some of those benefits without having to move all our addresses across from that left-hand side, the Sasines register, over to the right-hand side, the land register. Let me just talk through what unlocking Sasines can do. It can provide us with insights through existing data and resources. It can link the Sasines search sheets to a map for the first time. And it can give landowners a bit of better visibility of what they own. It may be a helpful stepping stone towards registration on the land register. Provide better value for the public purse. It can offer a larger, more enriched data set for the benefit of both the citizen and for the economy. And we hope all of that adds up to helping answer that question, who owns Scotland? So how will it actually work? What we propose is to use spatial data in the form of polygons to search Sasines, matching that data to Sasines search sheets, and then making that data visible. This will provide a statement of indicative ownership extent. In a bit more detail, what we're talking about here is working with landowners to obtain spatial data sets, either from the data provider who is the owner or from a third party. And we've designed a suitable data sharing agreement that allows us to use this information. We can then successfully, in most instances, search Sasines and link to that data set to surface our findings. So we make that link between the search sheet and the polygons. The outputs provide indicative ownership, not registration, and it's our interpretation from the best of our knowledge. So that word indicative is really important here. We've already worked with a few early adopters to help us refine this approach. At the moment, we're able to share the findings in static maps, which we'll show you on the next few slides. But as we progress, we think that we can increase benefits to a more micro level, allowing citizens themselves to search this data. For any use of this data at a macro level, we will be mindful of the level of spatial accuracy inherent in using information from the Sasines register compared to the land register. The fact that that's indicative boundaries. We will undertake robust quality assurance And if we cannot confidently match the provided spatial data to any Sasines search sheets, then we'll conclude that unlocking Sasines is not the right answer for that area of ground and won't proceed. So let me show you an example. And I'd like to thank our partners at North Ayrshire Council for allowing us to use their data for the purposes of this demonstration. Next few slides will show you how we went through the process. First of all, the data provider, in this case North Ayrshire Council, gave us their spatial data along with any relevant metadata they had. Our GIS team then goes through a series of checks using a predefined confidence level. We're then able to move on to step 2, where we can remove the draft and registered titles which are in the land register. So the blue areas left over show the data that's still contained within Sasines. This new data set, including all the related metadata, which could be anything. When I'm talking about metadata, that could be anything from the property owner's name, address, our confidence level in the data, or the date the deed was registered in Sasines, that kind of information. Then we use that, and that's all used by our Sasines search squad to find the related Sasines search sheets. And then we can move on to aligning that metadata and linking it into the polygons. So this slide demonstrates how we will gradually validate, populate, and surface Sasines information. The blue map, as highlighted earlier, that gave the whole area, signifies the land and property owned by North Ayrshire Council. And we were able to identify it as not registered on the land register. Moving on to the maroon area in this slide, that shows the areas that we've matched into Sasines and have found a corresponding search sheet or search sheets, and in most cases a deed. As we work our way through all the polygons in the map, we eventually will fill up with this colour shaded in. To put it in context, within a couple of days, we were able to identify the indicative ownership of 22 polygons and found relatable Sasines search sheets for each of these. That's significantly faster than if we were doing a full land register application for these, completing that. So far in this proof of concept we've been doing. Here's a number of areas we've been working on and shows the combined extents that we've validated in up till the end of August. The outcome of this was that we managed to associate, as you can see there, well over 120,000 hectares to a search sheet, and that's 1.6% of Scotland's land mass. So we're really excited that this will be a good way forward for us. The next slide just shows you a little bit more of the detail. This is the area round Largs there, around Dreghorn, that were from the North Ayrshire data set. And you can see a more detailed version of the information we were able to then feed back to the council. So what's our ask of you lot? We'd love you to get involved. We need spatial data to start this process off. We can then talk to you about matching it up. If you or any clients you know have data to share that's in some kind of GIS form, we can then use that as a precursor. It might be for the data provider, it may be that it's a precursor to registration. Or in the meantime, even if registration is a long way down the road, this will offer them greater visibility of the land they've got. So we're looking for opportunities to collaborate in different ways with different partners, and we'd love to hear from any of you who may want to find out more. So what's next? We've set out the project in its early stages. We, of course, have a priority in Register Scotland to not only complete the land register, but also to clear our backlog of casework. So we're working at the right pace with this project so as not to divert too much resource away from key services. We're hopeful, however, to be scaling up to a small squad of Sasines searchers who will be able to work through a priority list of spatial data sets. As you can see from this roadmap, we currently have 83% of addresses on the functionally complete land register. And remember, they're the ones which transact regularly. Over the next couple of quarters, we plan to publish further data on progress and keep people regularly updated. In addition to our maps, we'll seek to produce information tables and publish more information broken down at a local authority level. In future, we will consider how we can make this more accessible. We're considering a range of options, which might include publishing on ScotList. Further decisions are yet to be made on that, and we'll work with the legal profession, other stakeholders and customers to devise what's the optimum solution for this type of activity. We're looking for other innovative routes to achieve our goals, and we'll work closely with Geovation Scotland to identify any opportunities there. Throughout all of this work, we'll continue to progress first registrations as a key priority. So in summary, a few key messages. So lots of land and properties is still in the General Registry of Sasines, and it doesn't change very often. So that has made land register completion challenging. Whilst we continue to work on land register completion, we want to unlock the information in the Sasines register, using our spatial data to make it visually more helpful and accessible. Sasines isn't the same as land register completion, but it will allow us to access many of the benefits in a faster and cheaper way. It will indicate the likely ownership of areas, that indicative ownership of the areas not on the land register. And we can do that with a high degree of certainty, high enough for the information to be useful in various different ways. And we think all of that will help us answer that question, who owns Scotland? Hopefully providing useful knowledge and insights. Thank you. Now, I'd love to hand back over to Heather, and I think she'll manage us through questions, and we'll try and take on board any of the questions you've been asking. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you so much for that, Janet. That was a really interesting presentation, and hopefully all of our attendees found that informative and may have some questions for us. We'll just give you a few minutes if you would like to pop those questions into the chat. While we are waiting for those questions to come through, I'd highlight that we have a feedback survey that we will be sending out to you by email after the webinar is finished. We'd be really, really keen to hear your feedback on the session and unlocking Sasines, so we'd encourage everybody to please take the time to give a few minutes to completing that. We also have a range of webinars that we run at ROS. This is just one of a broad selection, so please do keep up to date on our website for all of our latest website offerings. Okay, so we've got a couple of questions that are coming in now. So we have one there asking, will a copy and the video be available for colleagues not able to attend? Yes, absolutely. We shall make that available on our website. And I've got another question here from Sandra, and she would like to know what benefit is this for our clients? And I'll pass that one over to our team.
Who?
Do you want me to take that, Janet?
Go for it, Keith. Go for it.
Yeah, so clients, the landowners that we've engaged with so far, they think they've got an understanding of what they own, and part of the unlocking Sasines process, they can give us their digital data. We can then confirm ownership by removing the land register titles, as Janet explained, as part of the process, and then tying the ownership back to the search sheet. So there's some comfort in there in that, you know, different clients have different understanding of their estate. And the councils that we've spoken to so far, they're really keen to get the outputs back from us so they can confirm what's still in Sasines, what's in the land register, and what's in their ownership. Hope that answers the question.
Great, thank you. And we've got another question from Carol, and say you mentioned the information not being linked with Scotland. How would we be able to access it?
Should I take? Go for it, Steve. Go on.
Yeah, so at the moment, yeah, we don't have it linked to Scotland. We need to look into doing a bit more research, user research, to see, you know, Scotland does seem a sensible place to house it, but obviously we want to go through the due diligence process of finding out what customers want. So it could well be that it ends up on Scotland anyway. It's just at the moment, whilst we're collating our data to get a meaningful data set, we don't have it published, and we won't have it published for a little while yet.
And can I just maybe add to that, Steve?
Yeah.
So I talked a little bit there about the macro and the micro benefits, didn't I? And so
yes.
we're slightly concerned that some people might on Scotland, people are used to zooming in and seeing a title at a time, and getting the real micro detail. And we're not talking about quite the same thing here. It's a bigger picture, indicative boundaries. So I suppose we just want to go cautiously before we, in case people misinterpret the level of accuracy of what we can take from Sasines. And so we will. It's definitely something we'd be keen to explore with people, but I guess, yeah, we're going a little bit more cautiously about that. So I suppose we'd share it back with people as their own data shared back in a new form, rather than necessarily sharing it more widely with the public at first, and then let's see where we go.
Okay, great. Moving on, we have a question from Debbie. Do landowners need GIS spatial data, or can you produce it using an estate map?
I'll take that one. We're looking for GIS spatial data, so it would be something that's transferable digitally, not static PDFs. I'm not too sure what you mean by an estate map, but we have had conversations with customers who've said, yes, we've got digital data, but it's actually been static PDFs, and what we're not doing as part of this process is interpreting static maps using mapping staff. We've got Sasines searchers involved in this process, but we haven't got plan staff, so it would be digital GIS data. I noticed, can I just keep going there, Janet, because I noticed underneath that there's a comment about it might be useful dealing with the backlog, including VRs we're focused on, and we're incredibly mindful of that. Surely that's essentially the team at the moment are me and Steve that's on the call. You know, it would be bigger, but we have got statutory obligations, you know, against all our products, you know, Sasines searches, plans reports, first registrations, TPs, and we are absolutely doing our best to eradicate those arrears. So it's a balancing act, you know, and we're not looking to put a huge squad of people onto this. It's very much going to be a small team that can cover a lot of coverage and offer a lot of benefit quickly. So thanks for your comment. Yeah, but appreciate that.
Thank you. I'll move on unless any of the other panelists would like to jump in. No, everyone okay? Okay. So moving on, we have Rona, and she says we have a lot of clients still interested in voluntary registration, and yes, they're concerned that resources are being diverted away. And I'll put a couple together here, because we also have Debbie, who's saying if a plan is produced, can it be used as a voluntary registration plan? Often the barrier to VR is the cost of registration, including obtaining a plan, and the plan's assistance service no longer exists. Pass over to the panelists for their comment.
Shall I just say about the plans assistance service maybe as a starting point for this, answering this, and then the other guys can come in. Yeah, we did stop the plans assistance service because we wanted to prioritize. We thought we were putting resources into that and not enough into clearing the backlog and dealing with the VRs and FRs with applications that we've got. So absolutely back to what Keith was saying, you know, we have been prioritizing clearing our backlog. I mean, you'll know, of course, many of you, just how busy the market has been. So the recovery from that hiatus, the first few months of COVID, we have found ourselves very busy. So we are still focused on trying to clear that backlog, but actually we would have thought we'd have been further along by now because of the busyness of the market, the activity in the market. So yes, hence we're not doing the planners assistance service. I think in answer to, we aren't planning to produce a plan for people, as it were. What we're talking about here is, can you give us some data, spatial data, that we can then work with and amend and show you what's already on the land register and so on, and feed it back to you. So if Debbie was thinking, could we start, with just the deeds but not with any spatial data, I'm not sure it'll quite meet what you were hoping for there. That would be something rather different. Keith and Steve might want to add something to that.
Yeah, I would. I think as well, to keep in mind that word indicative, the shapes or the polygons that we're providing might not necessarily be fit for land registration to the accuracy of that detail. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Another reason why we probably couldn't do that with any spatial data held on this new unlocking Sasines layer. And again, I think that on the first question about resources being diverted away, I can assure folks I've got no registration background, so I wouldn't be any good to registration. I'm a trained searcher, so, and as Keith said, there's only 2 of us here, and in the first month we produced 1.3% land mass, which is a bit more than what the registration team together could do. So that's just because it takes a lot longer than legal due diligence you have to do. So there's a lot of value there for quite a small team. And that's the thing to keep in mind with this. It's not tens of people, it's just a couple of people doing it at the moment.
I think there's a couple of comments just around plans not being proficient for a plans report or land registration, and really, we were for a while, as Janet says, although we were accepting plans from applicants, we were also the creators of plans through plan assistance, and I know that was an incredibly popular service, but unfortunately that's not something that we're looking to do at the moment. We haven't got infinite resources and experienced plans mappers, and those guys are working hard on dealing with the planned reports, dealing with the FR and TP backlogs. And there is obviously private companies that can provide plans that are out there in the commercial space. So it is something that we did used to do, and it was a lot of thought went into, do we continue with plan assistance service or not, because we know it was an incredibly popular service, but those staff are now needed just to deal with the high volumes. And as Janet says, the presumption at the start of lockdown was our intakes were going to really fall considerably, and we might have had the possibility to divert staff into other areas, but the market's so buoyant and the intakes are at record levels, so staff are required to deal with the registration work.
Yeah.
Are you happy to move on to the next comment? So we have another comment here from Shirley. I still do not understand what use all of this is to our clients. I suspect a political agenda. Would that be the case? I do not believe there is much demand for this out there apart from that, but of course I would be interested to be told otherwise.
So let me try and tackle that. So certainly from our point of view, that we're not running on any political agenda here. There is clearly Scottish ministers have been interested in land reform and what do we know about who owns Scotland from a policy point of view, and we think that is somewhat different from that's. Do you remember that slide I had with the two strands of the functionally complete and the unlocking Sasines? We think there are actually different reasons why people are interested in land register completion, and certainly for many people, many of your clients, it may be that when they come to want to sell something, they want to be us to be able to register it and quickly give the proper real rights to your clients. And so we want to be able to do that quickly, and we think that actually for anything that transacts frequently or regularly, that's what we want to do. So we want to be able to have less first registrations and voluntary registrations in the future, because actually more things are already dealings, and so that should make it easier and be a benefit to people who are transacting on properties. The other side of it at that kind of macro level is a sort of general interest in who owns Scotland, and that's at a much more that's quite a different question around actually is how much does the public sector own versus the private sector, and those kind of questions at that kind of level, and so that's quite a different question we're trying to answer, and we think unlocking Sasines could do that well enough without needing to actually know about every single property with a firm ownership boundary, and an indicative ownership boundary might do enough, be good enough for that. So we've been trying to kind of tease that out in terms of what are those kind of benefits across the different kind of audiences. And I think you're right, there are some policymakers who are interested for some purposes, and there are individuals who are interested for their own purposes, and they may need different levels of accuracy, spatial accuracy to the answer to that question, and so on. I don't know if I will have answered your question there, Shirley. I see Sandra agreeing with it.
Yes. As well, Janet, if I could just add, there's also quite a lot of value to our citizens, maybe not in that transactional thing, but if you think about land usage and they've got issues, they've got issues with land, with neighbouring their land. In the moment, if it's in Sasines, they have to, go through instructing a search. They have to find out how to do that and stuff like that. There's nothing there to say ownership in Sasines for people. So, it doesn't become a problem until there is one. And when there is one, that's where unlocking Sasines could provide value to the citizens of Scotland. I think that's quite a good point to add on.
Yeah, good point, Steve. Thank you.
I'd just like to add, sorry, I'd just like to add, for me, this is all about transparency, and I think the land register, it's really transparent. You click on the subjects and you can understand the extent. Somebody asked a question earlier on about what value this will add to other people, and I suppose it depends who you are and what your experience is, but the majority of people do not understand the Sasines register. They hit a blank when they're on ScotList, and they have to employ a searching company. And really, for me, this is about opening up the Sasines register, making it more visual. Yes, it's not land register quality, and we can't simply wait for the land register to be completed because it's going to take too long. So for me, it's about open and transparent data and making Sasines more accessible for our customers.
Okay, we've got a couple of other questions coming in. I note one about crofting, and I note one about deeds in the borough, but because it seems to be on a similar theme, I'll drop down to the bottom one from Sandra, and she says, I note my last comment was generally answered without specifically responding to why my clients want to spend money for no perceived benefit. Please answer.
Yep. So this is the general benefits of some farming clients not wanting to actually fully register their land. So it's interesting, isn't it? So there's some people have been saying that they do have clients who want to do voluntary registrations, and I suppose this is the flip side of that. The people we've come across who, aren't very interested in registering because they can't see the benefit of being on the land register. So we can't make this cost-free. I guess we're land registration it's giving a very accurate title, isn't it, to the land, and it does involve the conveyancing costs, and it involves the mapping costs, and it involves our registration costs. So there's costs in all sorts of different areas of that, and I suppose that has been a barrier to us getting further than we have so far with land register completion, title by title, as it were, address by address. So if your clients are not planning to transact at any time in the foreseeable future, that's exactly the kind of groups of people we've identified that actually we think maybe then there's no point in us just sitting and waiting for something that's not going to happen. We would be better looking at the data we have in Sasines and seeing if we can do something with that in the meantime, rather than hoping without really much evidence that maybe some of your clients, Sandra, would come forward and want to move on to the land register. So I don't know if that answers it a little better. So we're trying to come up with a kind of a compromise in a way that would cost less for your clients and would cost less for us, but would give us an indicative idea of the ownership in the meantime.
Okay, thank you for that, Janet. Any other thoughts from Steve or Keith, or shall I move on to the next question?
I'll take the one on Crofts and the one on the borough as well. So, hi Jane, the question on we'll be looking at the landlord titles or just identifying crofting tenancies, and we will just be looking at the landlord titles. We're looking at the land ownership of it, so it will just be landlord titles only that we look at. And for the second question from Mary, yeah, that's true. There are titles that are in the borough register. So we won't be looking at anything that's in the borough or particular registers. It's just going to be the first and second series general register of Sasines that we're looking at. As you'll probably know, the borough has its own complexities. It doesn't have like a search sheet or a title to look at. It's a register of deeds itself, and they're contained within the deeds. So if it's in the borough register, that could be something that I think Janet touched on. If we can't identify something, and that'll probably be something, say, a town hall in the borough, that will not be part of this process, and we'd move on to the next area to look at.
Okay, and I'll move on to the final question here from Shirley. How many private landowners have digital plans on tap that are willing to share? Will the majority who provide the information to you be public sector?
I'll take that one, excuse me. The majority of conversations we've been having so far have been with public bodies and the estates. Some people have got up-to-date digital estate plans, and other people have cabinets full of deeds. It really is a mixed bag. I know from a bit of work I've done in the past to do with VRs, is a lot of the private landowners didn't have up-to-date plans. Again, that's why they used the plan assistance service. That's why that was so popular. But in general, at the moment, we showed you the North Ayrshire Council data set there. Those guys have a pretty good digital estate, and it's been run by Steve, and Steve's comfortable with what he's seen so far, but it really is a mixed bag. People sometimes, and to be honest with you, it comes down to budget. An awful lot of it's down to budget. I know that when I was involved in conversations with voluntary registration, we met a lot of willing people, but they didn't have the budget for this. So yeah, it's a mixed bag, surely.
I'm just thinking that might be something we could keep feeding back on. We were thinking that, is it maybe a quarterly update we should be providing on our website on how we're getting on with this kind of work, and that might be so maybe within those quarterly updates we should be answering that question: who has been engaged, and see how that does pan out. So maybe within 12 months time we'll give you a better answer, Shirley. We'll have uncovered who does and doesn't have digital data.
Okay, so I think we're coming to the end of our questions there. I'd like to thank the panelists for their time, and I'd also really like to thank the attendees for their attention and their questions. This is a new project for us at Registers of Scotland, so all of your feedback, all of your questions are really extremely helpful to us as we consider the best way forward with this endeavour. So I think that's the end of our time, and if you've got any other thoughts or comments, please do get in touch. The person on the Contact Us forum there, that's Fiona McKee. She's the head of the Unlocking Sasines project and the head of Land Register Completion. However, we'll also pop Keith's email address into the feedback email. And yes, also just encourage you to take a bit of time to fill out that survey and let us know how we could be doing things better and differently for you in future. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you all. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.